the owner of the product to justify the life of the product, but a consultant could just say, yeah, that part you can ignore, or that part is silly and not fully developed, doesn't help you solve the problem you want to solve. And so it actually, my job is way easier as a consultant, and we can ship things way quicker. I don't plan things in 6 to 12 month timelines. I plan things in 1 day to 2 week timelines.
Peter Swimm with ToilVille is our special guest today on the Getting the Deal Done podcast. I'm John Martinka, and welcome, Peter.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So your company, ToilVille, works with workplace automation and helping
That's
your clients better use automation.
yep. A lot of people probably use the tools that we work with all the time and don't realize what they're doing, and they will copy and paste between things and all that. And we try to observe those patterns and find like really good low hanging fruit for people to utilize stuff so they can get back to the stuff they like doing about their job.
Okay. So I know when we were talking earlier, you said, you like to work with small businesses. You had worked a lot with the Fortune 500 over the years. How'd you get to where you are now with all this automation and AI and everything else?
So yeah, I started out in tech, working for big companies, and then did a stint in startups, and then started working for very big companies as a result of acquisitions of those startups. And I kind of saw a commonality even between teams of five and teams of 50,000 people of how people look at work and assign work and delegate work. And in my course of running product for big companies, I often got approached to people like, man, I wish you can help me, or I wish I could find someone like you to help us work through these problems more in depth than you have been. And eventually I realized I'm a person like me. And so I went out there and I've been doing that ever since. There's a lot of Occam's razor that comes when you're building these
Okay.
things out that you can't say when you're the owner of a product. Yeah, that part you can ignore, or that part is silly and not fully developed, and it doesn't help you solve the problem you want to solve. And so it actually, my job is way easier as a consultant, and we can ship things way quicker. I don't plan things in 6 to 12 month timelines. I plan things in 1 day to 2 week timelines, and it's a blast. It's great working with people and solving really cheap, easy problems.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are on your website. Business analysis. Give me an
Yeah,
example of how you help.
yeah. So a lot of times, I'll just talk like how we do things internally. Like we started out paying for a lot of SaaS products. We had the Figma subscription and we paid for GitHub. And the reason we did all these things is because it's easier to whip out a credit card and pay for something than to build it yourself. And using AI automation, we're slowly chipping away at the subscriptions and pulling stuff in-house as we do our work. And so now we're able to cancel things like our Figma account because our designer doesn't like using Figma. Our developers don't like using Figma. So we just built a bit of automation in the middle that takes the design artifact and transforms it into the developer artifact. And so it's nice not have to pay that hundreds of dollars every month, but also people don't have to use a program they're not familiar with to communicate with different parts of the company. And those are really good examples of the kind of things that you can do with a little bit of vibe coding or AI assistance that is like, you're not eliminating a job or a role, you're just cutting out this barrier that you couldn't afford to fix, whether through time or for energy. And those are the kind of things that are kind of like the lifeblood for small companies and gives them their ability to be very nimble versus like a large company, which would take weeks to like pick and buy and architect a solution.
So interesting. We talk about small businesses. What are the things that uh, AI, you combination of your firm and AI can do to make a small business run better?
Yeah. I think a lot of it, we really help facilitate the many hats syndrome in a company. So you'll have like a CEO who's also the CTO and the CFO and the CSO in one person. And so they're constantly shifting personas and shifting applications. And so one thing we do is like try to get them to do less copy pasting between email into, artifacts and all that. And we just build the piping and the bridging that does that. So, If your secretary wants to work in Notion and your executive wants to work in Teams and your developers want to work in GitHub, no problem. They just do their work there and it propagates to the other system. And this really facilitates things because, when I was working with big companies, I'd say 40% of my time was artifact generation of reporting out the structure of progress. And I think a lot of my clients do the same thing. I'll watch them, they'll take an email and they'll copy paste the information into the CMS to track the leads, and they'll go and copy paste that information into the a calendar program to schedule the calendar, and then they'll copy the notes from the meeting into the thing. And now we can have like pipelines that kind of do all this stuff automatically. Like I'm talking to you using video chat, and the AI is recording a transcript, and you could take that transcript and tell the sales database of, oh yeah, I need to do these 5 tasks before our next meeting. And so these little things are kind of like, they're small and they're cheap, but they're additive. And what makes small businesses very agile is their ability to spend more time and attention with their clients. And so if you could take that 20 minutes after the call that you have to do the housekeeping and just spend an extra 10 minutes talking to your client about unbounded things, uh, that will have good outcomes. You will get more dividends and you'll get more loyal customers. And these are kind of like things that I think are like the competitive advantage for a small company. I was working with this insurance company and he quit the big guys because he didn't like all the reporting structures and all the the red tape around things. But you still kind of need that. You're in a compliant industry. You need to like record things and do due diligence and all
Yeah.
that. So the automation is a tool that kind of keeps you grounded and safe and legally compliant, but also have that human touch and that time to do things. And that's kind of like my one takeaway working with clients is that you never have time. And they took the time they were working before AI, and now they're spending time messing with AI to get it to work right. And so it's kind of a solution in search of a problem in that regards, where people aren't seeing the dividends of their investment into this technology being any better or worse than the other versions of this technology before.
Does what you do apply to just about any industry, or do you have things that it really it just zooms along because it's a perfect fit?
So every industry is basically a file system when you think about it. And so I do work a lot with heavily regulated industries like insurance and the medical industry
Yeah.
and legal industry. But if you look at every company from a 1,000 mile view, they all have those compliant boundaries and rules and obligations. And so in that regard, we're pretty agnostic with the tooling, even though we're sensitive to the requirements of an individual client.
Yeah.
Um, it really is, at the heart of it, we are kind of talking about navigating boundaries. And the boundary is like us, them, company, client, the law, the state you're in, the country you're in, the economic systems, and then the restraints of the problem. And once, when we talk about ethical AI, we're talking about like how sensitive you are to crossing these boundaries. Um, we get into kind of this real kind of classical philosophical question with a lot of clients of like, what are the outcomes you're looking for? And, are you looking to like generate slop at scale, or do you want to use this process to improve your workflow in ways of you either don't have time for or you don't have the capability for?
Okay. Now, how do people fit into all this?
I think the one big mistake, especially with big companies as they approach AI, is calling them autonomous agents. With the impression that these things can just do work and print out money on the other end of it. And all the systems I build are designed to be human bounded and controlled and arbitrated. So imagine, you know, you are on the assembly line and things go by you and the machine helps you build it, but things don't go on to the next stage without you signing off on it. And I think this really prevents things like hallucinations and mistakes and embarrassing public relation disasters because just because the work was generated for you doesn't mean you remove the obligation of reviewing it and vetting it and uh, claiming that it's a product of your ethics and your mind view, right? And so, if you go in the court of law and you had AI wrote your opening arguments and the judge laughs you out of court, that's not AI's fault. That's your
Yeah.
fault for taking a piece of paper and just reading it verbatim with your reputation on the line. So a lot of the training that I do is really kind of a perspective shift of how people you don't delegate to AI. You are facilitating work with AI because AI has no cognitive understandings of the risks to you if it's wrong. Like the AI won't get in trouble, you will. You'll pay the fine and you'll be disbarred and you'll get sued. And the AI will happily keep printing money for whoever owns it.
Okay. So what you're saying is people are very important in this whole process. You, you're not just turning it over to
No, I think like, everyone has someone that they work with who knows where all the bodies are buried. The person that if they're sick, the whole company slows down. And instead of like making AI like those people, what can we do to give that person more time and autonomy to do their magic, right? What do we take off their plate? I think those are the winning stories of what AI is. So, if you have, your assistant or your CTO, your CFO, and they do amazing stuff, but they're tied up all day running meetings or taking notes, help AI help them out so they can do fantastic things that they're really good at.
okay, right? Uh, what are some of the, can you give us a couple examples of, and I don't care what industry it's in,
Sure.
where you've used AI in combination with their staff to improve
Mhm.
productivity?
Sure. One of the first industries that really saw benefits from these approaches was the contact center industry. And this is across anything, any place where you have to like have a room full of people picking up a phone or answering questions. Because when people started automating these things, they kind of realized if they were smart about it, they realized a couple things that people call because something went wrong or because they felt like they've been wronged. And so the difference between that is a difference between something that could be cleanly automated. It's like, oh, I'll give you a refund. I'll send out a replacement package. And been wrong is the company policy is unjust or it's unfair or all that. And someone has to arbitrate that. And maybe it's give them a refund and give them the policy, or maybe it's tell them can't help you. And so the contact center is something it's a known quantity. These companies are like, okay, this person talks to 80 people a day and it costs $5 a call and the average call length is 2.5 minutes. And so they come to a person like me and they're like, how do I automate my contact center? Which is, uh, it's kind of a problem that creates itself, right? Because, you know, if you're a person that serves customers, those customers should have a right to arbitrate and talk to you and get answers and be satisfied. And if either they'll leave or they'll go to competitors or whatever. And so I worked with this one contact center, and um, they are a very large American company whose health insurance for its employees is bigger than Medicare in 13 American states. And so they have a contact center just for insurance calls that has 200 people, and the average call length is 2.5 minutes, and the duration of that call is a minute of verification to prove you are who you are, and then the minute and a half of the question and the answer. And so instead of automating the whole thing, which the question, the answer could be the entire range of topics on healthcare, we looked at the verification thing. Verification is something that, a computer could do very easily. You talk to a computer and they're like, please enter your personal PIN or your code or whatever, enter a code, you're verified. And so you take that 1 minute, roughly half of every call, and you put it back in the system, and that is your savings. You don't have to lay people off. You don't have to hire more people. You can just take, instead of 80 calls a day, now you take 105 calls a day. And so that $5 a call goes down to $3 a call. And those are the kind of like counterintuitive things that, instead of trying to save all the money, they save a big chunk of the money. They are able to make the company happy, employees answer less uh, boring questions and problems. They can work on more interesting questions. And that's the approach you look at. If everyone's calling for the office hours, have a machine do it. That never changes. That's always the same. If they're calling about their dog eating something they shouldn't eat, it should go to a person because that is a sensitive issue. And now you have more time for that person to navigate and delegate that call, which lowers your risk and improves customer satisfaction.
Well, I get the part about the verification because it's just annoying when you call somewhere and they say, okay, enter this number, enter the last four digits of your social security number. And then you enter it again. And then you get a person and they say, what are the last four digits of your social security number? And and you say, didn't that come through? I already entered it. Nope, we don't get that.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I talked earlier about pay versus buy. That happens a lot in the contact center where that you may be calling one company and then they transfer you to a second company and then that person transfers you to a third company. And so a lot of these things aren't connected at all digitally. They are throwing you over the wall, just like transferring you to a different hotline, a number. And this is kind of a reflection of companies kind of build these things based on their org chart and not based on like the problem set of the person who calls, right? And the company I talked about earlier, they probably had a contact center for every division of their company. So that was like 20 contact centers that had nothing to do with each other data wise. So they're effectively separate companies within the company. And so that context of you're being passed around has to be restated and put on you, the customer, every call where you have to start from zero every time you're thrown over the wall to a different agent.
Yeah. So if you're a small business, you don't have the resources of a big company, and someone comes to you and says, "Well, I can have AI can help with this, or they can help with that." I mean, how do you know? I mean, is there I
So
mean, I know on your website you talk about testing strategy.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, we find that a lot of people don't really know how they work. And they understand like loosely how they work. I get up, I have my coffee, and I answer emails, but they don't understand like how many emails do you do per day? How long is your average email? And so when AI people say we're going to save you 900% of time, um, you don't interrogate that much because you have to reveal to them you don't understand how you use your time. So it's kind of like a good bluff that a lot of these AI vendors get. And the other thing that I think they need to show you when they telling automate thing is like, how do I measure every time I make a change if it's good or better or worse, right? And so a lot of times the solution to AI is more AI, and you get stuck at the 68% bar quality or the 70% bar quality, and you have no idea how to get it up to paying a person pick up the phone and being 100% sure it's right every time. And so you get kind of like in the sunk cost fallacy trap of these things where it's like, okay, well, I need to go to the bigger model and I need to spend more money on AI. And it's a leaky boat. And you plug one thing here and you get over there. So yeah, it sounds like a mess, and a lot of people avoid mess by avoiding doing it. But we try to help our customers kind of understand um, there's ways to like measure how you do work that aren't creepy and invasive and monitoring of employee activity because that is the first step that will make your AI better is being able for a machine to read that. If a machine can see like, oh, Tom's on the phone between 9 and 10 every day, I'm going to just block that off. I'm not ever going to try to book a meeting then. Those are actual insights that machines can use to like get people off your back to try to book you in that coveted phone call, email return hour. Having one little win like that gives you not only the understanding of how to evaluate your work, but also a win to start building on for other things. So you don't treat everything as like an atomic individual activity. You're kind of looking at how can I have my entire worldview of my desktop and my inbox and my wallet available for me. So when a person says, "What do we do next?" You understand what's the most profitable, best use of your time to do next. And maybe it's uh, close the office down and go play in your park with your kids for 2 hours, because it's sports day. So those are the kind of things that like are possible if you kind of go full in on this. And so, you need to show a couple wins to prove this to people because it's scary because it's like, I don't have the time for this. And the benefit of using these tools should be you get the time to think about what the next step is to get more time.
Okay. So on a practical basis, so I'm an M&A advisor and work with companies on getting them ready to sell. And you have
Mm.
advisors that do growth and sales and law. What are some of the AI things that could be done in an advisory business to make things go smoother?
I get this question a lot, especially from like people who are trying to help people and taking a lot of things. And I think the one commonality everyone has is, um, especially when you're acquiring someone or you're going to be acquired or you're trying to hire someone or you're trying to grant someone money, is what will they do with this opportunity or what will I get from this opportunity? And this is borne out via hundreds of meetings, emails, and you trade information. There's a lot of things that AI being computers can help with. Like one client I worked with, they would have the SOW compared against the email chain to make sure that all the meetings agreements made it into the letter of the contract. So if you look at the person across the table and you said this is going to cost 10 cents a dozen and et cetera, and it says 9 cents a dozen in the document, and your lawyer misses it, that could be thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that is a good kind of like spell check for compliance and absorbing information. The other thing I run into is a lot of people, especially not for profits, they run into documentation issues. If you're not regularly copying down all your receipts and all that stuff, these are also things automation really help with. So if everything that comes in your inbox is filed away neatly, you can find it. And when the IRS comes knocking, you have receipts for everything, and you look like you're doing your due diligence, even though you may not have the experience of a professional CPA on hand to verify it. And I think these kind of things where you take a person who wants to do work, but maybe doesn't have the ability or the resources to do the work of a, well-defined organization, uh, it makes them less materially at risk of things because they're ready to print out whatever form X comes along from regulatory body B on a whim. And so this also helps people who are on the administrative side because they may not be available to compile information quick enough for them to act or make judgment. And you're able to just kind of hook in machines and do handshakes and, pull in at least a first draft to talk about, and understand like what is and where the deficits really are.
Okay. All right. On your website, you've got an interesting line on the bottom. The ship was the invention of the shipwreck.
Yes, yeah. This is one of my favorite quotes from a French philosopher, and his argument was like every time you invent a new thing, you are obligated to handle any situations that arise from the utilization of the thing. So ChatGPT invents ChatGPT, OpenAI invented ChatGPT. They are materially responsible, in principle, for anything bad that happens from it. You know, and that's just unavoidable side effect of the invention. There's a thing in AI called the trolley problem, and the trolley problem states, okay, there's a trolley and it's on the wrong track, and it's going to crash into another trolley, and you could throw a switch, but it'll kill everyone on one of the trolleys. Who do you save? And that's already too late in the process. Like, you invented a system where two trains can collide. You're materially responsible for everything that results as a part of that. And when people come to building AI tools, they're often so focused on the outcome that they don't understand the cost. And so a lot of the work that we do, we talk about measuring work. We're also measuring outcomes. So like if you are automating a tool and that saves the CEO 3 hours a day, but causes your CSO to have an extra 40 hours a week of meetings about issues in downtime, you're just kind of moving the problem around. You're not creating structurally sound situations. So a lot of the work that we do is also highlighting uh, the hidden cost. There's a thing in AI that's called mechanical Turks. When you talk to Alexa and you talk to other machines, a machine voice comes out the box. But on the other end, there might be a person in a call center in the global south or anywhere in the world who's just typing an answer for you. And that is a really kind of shadowy use of how AI is using to kind of like hide and move labor and processes behind a sheen of technology when it's not materially any different, but now you're paying rent to companies like Amazon and Google, uh, and you might as well just hire people. If you wanted to pay rent the rest of your life for a virtual employee that's actually a real employee at some call center somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, What do you like to do when you're not playing with AI?
Um, I'm a dad and I have an 11-year-old and she loves to read. So we take her to the library, we go play in the parks and stuff like that. I try to, you know, my wife would probably disagree how successful I am at this, but I try to stay away from technology. I like music. I like making music without the aid of computers, guitar and things like that. And I think like that's also a really important part of it is like, uh, a hammer views every solution as a hammer looking at a nail. People in tech kind of look at everything as solvable by computers. So I try to do things without computers as much as I can
Oh
just
yeah,
to keep my brain fresh and keep my
I
perspective clean.
I get it. Is there, Peter, is there anything I should have asked you and didn't?
No, I think a lot of people have these questions. And of course, if people listening to this have a question or call, feel free to reach out to me on my website. Peoplemakeitbetter.com is the easy way to remember it. And I'm happy
Oh,
to just talk to people, especially people not for profits and people trying to do good in the world for
why
each
don't you
other.
say that again? Because I mean, you got ToilVille, ToilVille.com.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I made a shrewd bet that people would remember peoplemakeitbetter.com better.
Peoplemakeitbetter.com. Okay.
Yep.
So, special guest today, Peter Swimm with peoplemakeitbetter.com. And a lot of insights into AI, way over my AI, we'll call it my pay grade. And I learned a few things from you. And I, th- I do think we all know it's something in the future, but it's something
Yeah,
I think is going to help a lot more people than it's going to hurt if done right.
yeah. And at the end of the day, people are still doing it. So, we got to be people first. Even if people don't touch it, there has to be a person in there. So that's the only
Well,
way through it.
thank you for being here, Peter.
All right. Thanks for having me.